Hey everyone, Audi555 here. Welcome to today's video. On a side note, I've got a brand new microphone set up in my helmet, so it probably sounds a lot better than my older videos. So my new microphone is going to make it a bit more clearer, and hopefully when I do writing, the quality will come through a bit better. But anyway, today's video, it's on the Honda CTX700. Now I have the naked version, so it's a 700N or CTX700N, but the bike also comes in a full-fared version. Looks slightly different, but essentially the same bike. Also comes in a manual and automatic transmission version. I've got the manual. So, this video, it is the 100,000 kilometer review video. So officially I've ticked over to 103,963,000 kilometers. 103,963. That's a lot, right? But not on this bike. So in today's video we'll be talking about how this bike has been now that it's done 100,000 kilometers, and coincidentally it's now 10 years old as well, and if it's still worth it to get one of these bikes if you're looking at buying one. So the bike itself has performed phenomenally for the 100,000 kilometers that I've owned it for. I bought it secondhand and I had about 1,500 kilometers on the bike when I bought it. The previous owner really didn't ride it much, wasn't really the style of bike for them, so they were happy to offload it and I was happy to take it on. And I bought it really just on a whim, really. I had done zero research into Honda CTX700 bikes. The only thing I knew about it was a Honda and it was a cruiser style and it looked cool. And I was like, yep, that'll do. So I just jumped in and bought the bike, and I'll tell you what, I'm glad I did. It's Honda, so it's reliable. A lot more reliable than my previous motorcycle, which was Hyosung, which broke down multiple times. Nothing on this bike has gone wrong in the 100,000 kilometers, with the exception of a rear wheel bearing wore out, probably prematurely, but could have been due to me excessively loading the bike up and doing lots of road trips. And the fork seals leaked when I first bought it, because the previous owner, with only 1,500 kilometers on it, didn't really ride it enough to keep those seals lubricated, so they leaked and needed to be replaced. That's it. That's all that's gone wrong with the bike, and nothing major. The engine's performing perfectly. I've done the valve clearance myself, and if you're buying one of these bikes, you probably have to do the valve clearance at 80,000 kilometers. That's probably when you'll need to do it. And that was simple enough to do myself. You pull off the radiator, take off the top of the engine cover, and you get to the valves and you spin the crank over and line up the valves. Anyway, it's an easy process. Takes you a couple of hours if you've never done it before, and you just got to have the tools for it, and they're just basic tools you can get at a hardware store. Performance wise, it's a pretty good engine, I think. It's got a really low center of gravity. It's a twin parallel 270-degree crankshaft, which means it's nice and smooth when you ride it, and that low center of gravity means that you don't feel the weight of the bike. Honestly, I've ridden a Honda Grom before, just jumping on it, and it felt very similar to this. In fact, this bike feels like a bigger Honda Grom when you ride it, because the weight is just so down low on it that you just don't feel it. It is light and nimble, easy to control, easy to ride, and reliable. I have no regrets with buying this bike, and I've been completely happy with it. The biggest qualm though that people do have with riding this bike is probably the rear suspension on these. It's a very cheap monoshock. It does have adjustable preload on it, but some people find that it's just not good enough. If they're a heavier rider, let's say more than 110 kilos, they probably will complain a lot about that preload and need to adjust it a bit, and if that's not good enough, they'll probably swap out the suspension to something better. But it is a budget bike, so the bike's really just been manufactured by Honda as a basic commuter that you can tour around with if you wanted to, and you can really put some kilometers on this bike and do it in style. So I've done a few mods to this bike, being it's just got a different exhaust pipe on it. The standard one is different. A lot of people swap them out because it sounds like a sewing machine. I've put these 3-point harnesses on there from Shad to put my Shad luggage cases on there, and this backrest, I've put that on there in this case. And the last thing cosmetically is I put these wind guards on there for when it's winter and it's cold. Oh, and of course this these frame sliders here, I've put them on. They don't come with the bike, they're T-Rex ones, and I keep forgetting all the mods. I've got a centre stand on it here as well. Old mate's like, oh, does he need a lift? So they're the mods that I've done with it, and it just really makes the bike another notch, you know. With those shad bags on the side, you can tour everywhere. These means you can ride longer in the winter before your fingers freeze off. Oh, the radiator guard, I've added that. Means that I'm not going to get a chip in there and have to wait a few weeks for a new radiator to come in the mail. Yeah, the mods are really practical for me. Air filter wise, I've just put a K&N air filter in, and it makes 0 performance differences. So yeah, there's no other performance mods that are done to this bike, and nor should I do them, because, you know, it's not a sports bike. It doesn't need to be dynoed and whatnot. It's just a bike to get you from A to B comfortably and enjoyably. And I've also got a tyre pressure monitoring valve cap system anyway. So if you're not familiar with this, with a Honda CTX, and you're just really looking at this video because you want to know if you feel like this is the bike for you, I'll just give you a quick rundown. So this pops up, you got your fuel cap in here, and that's just removable with a key. You can pop that up there when you fill up, and it's a 12.1 litre fuel tank. Tiny, but enough to get you more than 300 kilometers range. This bike is very fuel economical. It uses about 3.4 to 3.5 litres to travel 100 kilometers. So I've never run out of fuel in this bike. I think the most distance I've ever travelled is 340 kilometers before I got to the petrol station, and I still had maybe half a litre left in there, so that was alright. Your dash is nice and easy to read. It's got a clock, a fuel gauge, a tacho, a speedo, and the total odometer, as well as trip A and trip B meters on there. It's very basic, but that's everything that you really need. I've got a phone mount, which another mod, here we go, a phone mount. It's just a RAM mount, and that clipped in there. You can do that if you want, and you can ride your GPS and everything. I've got a USB port which I've installed in there. Another mod, I keep forgetting about all these mods. It's to then charge my phone, but you know, all these mods make it really comfortable. Alright, so switchology, you've got your normal kill switch here. This is your starter button. You've got your clutch, your front brake. This is the manual version, of course. You've got your high beam, then low beam, and a pass, so you can flash people with that one. You've got a horn, hazard light button, indicators left and right, and you push it to cancel it, and your starter switch is over here. Throttle, obviously. Your mirrors, they're great, these mirrors. Actually, I should just quickly mention that these mirrors are probably the best mirrors that I've ever ridden on a motorbike with. These are the standard mirrors because they're so wide, and I've got wide shoulders, so I can see everything behind me. I've been on sports bikes, and in the mirror you kind of like got half of your body in there and you can't see anything, but these, I've got these, I can't even see my shoulders unless I angle them in a bit. And they're phenomenal. Anyway, so let's start this bike up. There we go. Starts first go every time. It's got a kill switch as well in the stand, so if you pop the stand down when you're in gear, the bike will turn off, as well as you won't be able to start it if it's in gear. And now that it is in gear, because the neutral light's not on, I have to hold the clutch in, and I'm good to go now, so I'm in gear. Yeah, so it's basic functions that you want on a bike. And I should mention this model actually has ABS. In Australia, all of them have ABS, but I know in America it was an optional accessory you could buy with ABS or without. And I think it's good to have the ABS. You can definitely ride it without an ABS, but just having that peace of mind, especially in days like this where it's wet, that you'll be able to stop a little bit easier. Doesn't have traction control, but it doesn't need it. It doesn't have the ability to really do any wheel spins. No matter how much I throttle it, it's not going to spin that wheel out, and I'm not going to lift the front wheel up either. No matter how hard I've tried, you cannot wheelie this motorbike. So riding wise, it's very nimble, lightweight, easy to control. If you're a beginner rider and you can ride this bike in your country as a beginner, highly recommend it. It is phenomenal for beginners. If you're an intermediate rider, you will still have a lot of fun and an enjoyable experience riding this bike as well. If you're older or you are, let's say, a bit frail, the bike is also easy to control, so it's not over the top heavy. You can maneuver it on a flat surface, pushing it backwards easily as well. So it's very appealing to a broad range of riders. If you've been riding for years and you're used to phenomenal speeds on sports bikes, you may find the engine is a bit lacking, but it's not designed to be a sports bike engine. You have to get your head around that. Even though it is quick to 60 kilometers an hour, the rest of it is a bit sluggish and you might want for more power. I personally don't want for more power. I think it's got more than enough for my purposes, and it is it's plenty of power for me. If you're riding in the city, perfect. If you're riding out on the country, perfect. It is really a bike that does all different riding types, bar any off-road stuff. Obviously it's a cruiser, it's not designed to go off-road. You can take it on light gravel though. As long as it's smooth and flat, you'll be okay. You can't do any big ruts. It doesn't have the ground clearance for that. If you want to go off-road, you're probably better off getting an adventure bike. Hint hint as to what's coming up in my channel. Than getting this bike. But having said that, like, phenomenal bike. So I'm accelerating now, pretty quick to 60. There's no dramas sitting at 100 kilometers an hour on the highway all day, every day. It will go faster, obviously. I don't have any speed zones that are faster than 100 around me. So you just take my word for it, but you can easily go 110, 120, 130. Probably I'd max out at 130 because you want a little bit more extra oomph left in your engine to get you out of some trouble. So if you're in Northern Territory doing 130 kilometers in their 130 kilometer zones, it'll do it, but you are running out of engine capacity. Probably at about 140 is probably the top speed on the bike, but really I'm never going to ride that fast, and a lot of riders will never do that. So if you want to go that fast, you get a sports car, right? Not a motorbike that you could fall off if a large insect hits you. So it is a foggy day today, so I'll just pop up over here to get some radiation therapy from this tower. I kind of got sidetracked actually. I was going to talk about this fuel cap thing. So obviously I've showed you the fuel cap and that can go up there. This actually has a glove box in here as well. So I've got a lot of things in here. So I've got this for my stand if I'm parked on dirt surfaces like I'm on now, but you can see the amount of stuff I've got in here is great. Like, I think this is a feature that's really lacking on modern motorbikes, is the ability to just put your wallet somewhere. Like, sure, I can put my wallet and glasses and stuff in here, but all of this extra space is just unreal. You can really load that up. Because of all of the extra space, they had to make this fuel tank smaller, I guess, because you've got the air filter inside under here, and then you got the glove box, and then you got those empty spots there, and then the fuel tank is underneath all of that. But, you know, 12.1 litre fuel tank is fine for this bike. Keeps the weight down as well, and gives you, 300 plus kilometers in range, and I'm sure that will do everyone's road trips. Fuel stations are usually less than 100 kilometers away from each other, so you can't really complain. So overall, I think this bike is very good to get if you're looking at buying one in the used market. Things that I would just make sure of is that it had been regularly serviced. If it had any valve clearance checks done on it, that's good to note, but realistically, until you hit about 80,000 kilometers, you won't need to get them done. but you can always just, you know, ask the previous owner if they've done it. If they've done a lot of maintenance on the bike themselves, being the previous owner, then, you know, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt or trust your gut feeling. So if it's something as simple as an oil change and an oil filter change, anyone could really do that. It's not that hard. It's just unscrewing a bolt to take the oil out and unscrewing an oil filter to take it off and put a new oil filter on, putting the oil bolt back in and filling it back up with oil. Like, it's pretty easy to do, right? So I wouldn't be too stressed as long as it's being done. It is a Honda. They're phenomenal. I'll start this bike up so you can see. It's going to start. That's what it should sound like when it starts. You know, if it's a bit maybe it just needs a new battery, but it's, you know, nothing really goes wrong with these. Chain maintenance wise, my chain is a bit rusty because I've had a lot of rain this week and I haven't been able to keep up with my chain maintenance. But chain and sprockets, it's not that expensive on the bike if you needed to change that out. And lastly is tyres. I ride with the Michelin Road 6 on the front and rear. They're the best tyres you can get for this motorcycle for the wet, slippery conditions as well as dry conditions. They cost a bit more, but go with them. I highly recommend it. Michelin Road 6. If you can only get Michelin Road 5s, go with that. That's fine. 4 is okay-ish, but they don't last as long as the 5, and the 5 doesn't last as long as the 6. So the 6 is the best one. It's dual compound, soft rubber in the middle and harder on the edges. So that way you can ride on slippery days and you're fine, and you can take the corners fine as well. I am 6'1" and I can flat foot it. The seat height is ridiculously low. Its comfortable foot forward position means that a taller rider like me doesn't feel too cramped, but I'd say if I was more than 6'5", I'd probably get a bit annoyed because my knee, I got long legs, but my knee sits under here just fine, but if it was longer it might sit up here and that would just feel a bit weird. So it's something to know if you're tall, but shorter riders shouldn't have any dramas with this. You can probably flat foot it, nice and easy to ride. Yeah, so that really wraps it up. They're a phenomenal bike. It's 10 years old, but it's still relevant in today's commuting. It's a fuel miser, so it's even more relevant because you're going to save a bundle of money on fuel. To sum it up, would I sell this bike? Probably not. In fact, I'm looking at buying a second bike to do what this can't do, which is adventure riding. I could take this on like gravel, but very slowly, and if I drop it, then, you know, I'm going to be in a bit of trouble. It's not an adventure bike. So I love this bike for its ability to commute effectively and cheaply, its reliability and its build quality. They're the things that really hone down for the reasons of keeping this bike. As well, it is enjoyable to ride. It's fun, it's easy, it's simplistic. Maintenance is pretty easy to do on this bike yourself, as well as cheap if you get a dealer to do it, because there's really not much that goes wrong with them. Some people have 300,000 kilometers, maybe 400,000 kilometers on their bikes, and they're still going with no major issues and no engine rebuilds required. So yeah, phenomenal. And part of me wants to keep this bike for as long as I can, so that way I can see how long it actually lives for. It's a great bike. It's become part of who I am as a person, I think. It's become part of my identity. Well, anyway, as usual, keep safe out there on the road. Stay on two wheels, not on your head. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you choose to, and I'll see you all next time. Laters!